about what
are we grateful for?
Yeah.
In life, you mean?
Yeah.
In life?
I'll give you
Okay.
I'll give you a heads up because I'll give you mine first.
Oh, I know what I'm grateful for, but that's cool.
All right, good morning, everybody. We're coming into, after the commercial, turning down the volume, as I'm always warned to do. Turning down the volume. Here we go. There we go. Good morning, everybody. I am Coach Whiteman, or in a more formal sense, Dr. Whiteman. 360 Performance every Friday at 11 a.m. I'm having trouble holding back my excitement because I have two wonderful guests with me today that I really cherish their participation in what they've done in life and how they've, kind of gone through the labyrinth of the changes and the turns and stuff, because it fits the show today, in addition to just making me feel good about the fact that these two people are in the world, and I know them. So I want to make sure they understand that. And we start our show. We start our show every week with a little bit of an intro on what's the world going on to. I'll give you word bites, Oscars, NFL draft. Where is your favorite quarterback, and who might that be? And March Madness has trashed my brackets. I'm sorry, that's just what's happened. And Coach K and Go Hogs. Arkansas Razorbacks, rock and roll, and Coach K is beating the numbers with his teams. I can't tell you how happy I am to see a man of that quality go out in the style that he's exiting his career as a NCAA coach with the Duke Blue Devils. So with that being said, let us get started with, every week we set up our show on Friday with the Mindset Moment. And this week's Mindset Moment is from Jessica Chastain, and gosh, I can't tell you how much I appreciate the quality of her acting, because it's been the roles have been so diverse. At every one of those roles, she delivers a figurative punch, and in some cases, literally a punch. But here's what she has to say about what I believe men need to know about participating in the role of the power of women. And she says this: I think in the past, being brave, being powerful, being strong were qualities that people associate with being masculine. And I think, no, I don't think, I know that now we're realizing they can be feminine too. Absolutely. And that sets the stage for what we're going to be talking about today with my guests, Pam Rennell and Shelley. And I'm going to ask them to continue to start the show off with me, starting with Shelley first. Shelley, would you share with us what you're grateful for after I tell you that I'm grateful for the insights and awareness my mom taught me? What are you grateful for?
Oh my goodness, it's so difficult to choose because honestly I have been a very lucky woman. Like you, I had terrific parents. My values that hold today are the ones I was taught by my parents. Hard work, be good to other people, always put yourself in someone else's shoes. You're no better than someone else and you're no less than someone else. Be decent, be kind, be strong, be independent. Those are lessons I learned that I carried forward, but I have to tell you right now, in this moment of my life, in this season of my life, I'm so thankful for my energy, my health, and most of all, my children. I had children very late in life, and so I'm very, very fortunate to have them.
Well, and best to your son as he pursues the day today.
Thank you. Thank you.
So moving on to Pam, Ms. Rennell.
Yes.
What are you grateful for?
I'm grateful for so many things. It's similar to both of you. I think we all hold similar values, and that's why I think we're all friends and colleagues as well. I would say I am, in this current space, very grateful for my health, my family, my friends, the opportunities, and just trying to stay positive and stay positive and help support each other. And I found this amazing group of people, just virtually even, that you just find these great people that you connect with and you help support each other and build each other up and keep each other going. And I think during this time, I'm so incredibly grateful for that.
I'm glad you both made the connections as I led off with the family side of things. And I'm going to reference family as it relates to gratitude, because it's foundational. It's just like an anchor,
Yes.
you know? It's like a key
That's
brick
right.
to the mortar that creates the definition of your life. I really love that connection between the three of us. Now, I know Pam, you better than I know Shelley, but in knowing you both, I'm getting the sense that, you know, family has its moments where it tests your courage and gives you
Patience.
yeah, but then, you know, in those moments when you're kind of frowning and growling at people, then you walk away and you reflect historically, oh, you remember when we did that? So there's always the family brings you a smile on your face. Not always at the moment you want it, but eventually when you reflect back on it, it was all good stuff. It was all good stuff. So I'm going to talk about good stuff, but I'm going to start off with restating the theme. It's about man's role and understanding and relating to women's power. We don't understand it. I'll tell you what I've said to my son, my grandsons, because they're old enough now to understand. I tell them men are stupid. And they laugh and they think it's funny. And I say, well, guys, here's what I mean by that. You have to listen. You have to be aware of the people around you with the intention of understanding them before you ask to be understood. And that is a simple definition of empathic listening. But here are some men who didn't quite get it. They haven't gotten it. And they made a list. They got a list. They got on the list of men who don't understand women and find themselves in positions.
Boy, that has to be one heck of a long list.
Well, it is, but I'm going to give you some highlights. Like, for example, Matt Lauer. Matt Lauer's response to how he doesn't get women is that it was consensual. That was Matt Lauer's responses. I paraphrase, but it seems poignant. Another one is Tony Robbins. Tony Robbins' response to not understanding women's power and how he needs to respect that was, I've been misrepresented by and my methods, you may not everybody can understand my methods. So when you come to my classes, you may be misunderstanding things. And then there's another one, Luke Walton. Basketball player in the NBA, then eventually basketball coach, head coach for the Los Angeles Lakers. It's regretful. I can only imagine what his dad had said to him when he discovered the behavior of his son. Because fortunately, I am fortunate. I know Bill Walton. I don't know his son Luke that well, but I know what his dad's expectations are because of the coaches that Bill had as a player at UCLA. Then there's a gentleman that many may not know about is A.J. Calloway. But as a man of color, he really pushed the envelope of understanding of what men of color are trying to get away from as the paradigm of who they are. Like exposing yourself, your genitals to a female in a limousine. Thought that was okay. You know, that was so he had exposure and then he proceeds to deny it. Now,
Of course.
yes, exactly, of course. I'll end with Jamie Foxx on the list. Jamie Foxx has been accused, and he is confident, still pending, he is still confident that his facts and recall will clear him of any of the accusations that have been thrown his way. But I end with Jamie because that typically seems to be the rationale for men. Well, that wasn't me. That was a figment of my imagination, or yours, that defined who was there with you and did those dastardly deeds. So let's compare and contrast. Let's put a list together of those men who have publicly, in writing in some cases, supported the power of women. For example, the Ethiopian Prime Minister, Abiy Ahmed. Abiy Ahmed actually went in front of international crowds and put himself and his career on the line and stated publicly the support in contradiction to the law and legislation in Ethiopia in benefiting and supporting women's rights and the social equality that they needed. Another one to follow that up. Recently, of course, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres, he came right out and said, these things that I've experienced are wrong, and we need to change them. Here's one by just the monikers, number 41 POTUS, or number 44 POTUS. We all know who that is. Barack Obama has been more than vocal over the years about, well, I'm guessing if he doesn't, he's going to get some pushback at home. But he has been openly supportive of the role of women in business, in culture, in the arts, in being able to understand their power. Another one, because this gentleman, number 30, not number 44, but number 30 on the Golden State Warriors, that's Steph Curry. He and his wife are beautiful partners and examples of the understanding and the respect that men should exemplify towards women. And quite honestly, back at you. If you give the respect, you get the respect in equal portions. His wife, as a public figure, a world-class chef, they have collaborated together in that food space, as does and has John Legend, singer, songwriter, actor, married to one of the most voluptuous women I have ever seen. A mom, a cook in her own right, as well as being a spokesperson and actress. They too have a partnership that represents characteristics and examples of how men should get their shit together and figure it out. I'll end with an actor. Sorry, I won't end with an actor. I'll end with a political figure. But the actor is Benedict Cumberbatch. He's been very vocal about his roles and the fact that his acting needs to have consideration for the story. And if the story doesn't consider the role of women, it's not something he's going to participate in. The last one I'll mention to you is also a couple, or part of a couple, Prince Henry and his lovely wife. They have, oh gosh, talk about slings and arrows. Oh my gosh. From their own family. Those are examples that I hope will set off our conversation in contrast to the first list that I gave you. So here's a question for both of you with that information. I'll take a breath because I don't breathe very often. I just kind of get after it. Question for both of you. So what questions do you get from men that disrespect your skills and powers most often? Let me start with Pam.
I would say probably not even getting the question.
That's a good one.
That is so true, Pam. That is so true.
Because you're just not asked, right?
Correct.
And so give me the categories of decision making and power centers that the questions are not asked in.
Future strategies, rollout of new products, succession planning.
Oh, that's a good one.
Process.
That's a big one. What, Pam?
Yeah, just processes, procedures.
Yes, processes. Really, anything.
Yeah.
We have to be smart and we have to be very vocal and step forward in presenting ideas because we're really not asked a lot.
Now I'm going to give you, to that point, guys, and your answers, that you bring up such a great point. A medical cellular level point that's a difference between men and women that men do not know, and if they did, I don't know if they'll respect it. As human beings grow, a girl and a boy from infancy, the amygdala in their brain matures faster for women. Now, that
by about 40 years.
Well, I'll give you some dates on that too to your okay. Comment. As we know, girls tend to grow faster physically, but their amygdala is the center for those elements of thinking related to planning and strategic thinking. So that's why little girls, over the years, when in a male-dominated culture, which we still have components of, were thought of as being the planners, Susie homemakers, put the units together. Well, okay, that's a very narrow and chauvinistic viewpoint, but that's what we have. Well, why don't we take it from a more complete level and say, look, if we're going to not ask questions, it shouldn't be in the planning area because women have a more mature center in their brain to that point. And if you really want your company to grow and be really progressive, you might want to take advantage of that skill set that is organic. It's part of their makeup. I'm not dissing men. They eventually catch up. Once they get past 25, they start to kind of catch up. But up until their late teens and early 20s, men have a muted sense and capability of being strategic thinkers and planners in comparison to women. That's just the...
And then at 25, they have to learn it. And how long does it take them to do that? And culturally, are they supported to think that way? That's the other issue. Socially, culturally, they're not encouraged to go down that road. It's just a shame because this isn't a, I've worked with wonderful men and I've worked with wonderful women, but it's difficult for all of us, whichever gender we are, that in our personal lives, we're sort of, we want to recognize differences, right? But when you get into work, you can't just take that all off, and I wish we could. We're just dealing with human beings, regardless of it, whether it's male or it's female. But cultural and social and family influences, it just makes it a very difficult thing for people to change what might already be sort of ingrained in them, and that's both for male and female.
So Pam, with that background that we've just shared, what have you tried in an effort to stop men from mansplaining?
It's a good question, and I know Shelley's gonna probably agree with me on this, but what happens is I try to validate my experience, right? And there's multiple things that I'll do. One, like, I feel like I either need to like pull my hair back, wear a blazer, just so visually you're looking at me and maybe it's not as feminine. So in your brain, it's like, okay, I'll try to validate my experience and tell you why I'm able to provide this information. But I think that sometimes when I have spoken up, it's seen as dramatic. When I'm just trying to flag, something that potentially is a future potential pitfall that I've seen, I've experienced in the past, but I feel like I have to validate why I'm saying that. Here's my experience, here's what I'm offering, and then like, she's being dramatic. No, I'm providing some information based on my experience. It's been something that's definitely been a frustration of mine, coming from the business side of things and publicly traded companies that I've worked at, multiple, and some have been amazing and some people aren't. And like Shelley said, we've worked with some amazing people in our careers, but there's definitely that one, if there is one or two, that really it's hurtful and it's unprofessional and it doesn't feel good.
Pam, when you've made the effort to do the things you've done, how do you know the man gets it? That he learned from you how to change his behavior? Is there a certain move, facial expression? Do they actually take what you say and actually practice something? Or how do you know?
You don't, I guess. Like, it's the future. What are you going to say?
Pam, I would say, in my experience, is when you've covered their butts about something.
Oh, that's
you've saved them. You've saved them. They weren't listening. They went down a wrong road. They come back to you in a panic. You reorient and reconstruct and push them out there, and they do well. You've saved their butts. That's when they begin to see you of value. When it hits home to them, and when it matters in terms of their performance and how they're seen, and you've affected that, then they begin to trust you. But it takes a lot to get there.
All right, so
would you agree, Pam? I mean,
yes.
I've seen you save so many men's butts.
I know at least one of them.
I'm thinking of two in particular, Pam, and you know who I'm talking about. I mean, really, they depended on you, but it took a while, and even then, after the first or even second time, it isn't as if they, at the very beginning of a project, they come to Pam or me and say, "Hey, what do you think?" It's usually when they're in trouble or they can't think for themselves.
So, Shelley, at what age should we begin to train the male species to respect and honor not only females but humanity in general? Because if they're not honoring females, it's gonna spill over into some other area. Somebody of color, somebody of a diminished capacity.
That's right.
So when do we start training them?
Well, as a mother, I had to think about this, right? Because I had twins late in life, and I had a boy and girl. So I've seen the very ingrained differences in the same household with the same messages, how different they can be and how different they can respond to things. And I would say you have to do it from the very beginning of when they can understand what you're saying. And foundationally, yes, humans and just humankind. And then on top of that, reinforce messages or de-enforce, sort of pull back from messages that they either hear and or they sort of parrot from their friends
Yeah.
and take those on one by one as they happen. It's just critical. I mean, one of my biggest things is my son is 14, and I'm trying so hard, and I've tried since he was a baby to always, and his father too, try to raise him so that he is respectful not only of women but of every human being, regardless of race, creed, color, social, economic positioning.
Now,
we try so hard.
Pam, you'll relate to this because I have Jewish guilt that I'm thrust into routinely. And so I've had grandmothers and aunties tell me, I'm going to influence you from womb to tomb. You can't get away from me. When I was younger, I'd go, ha, 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 and I didn't quite understand. And then regretfully, I've lost some family members, and they truly are still in my head. They're on my shoulder, whatever the environment is that triggers it. So I'm gonna ask the same question to you, Pam, in a different way. When you are working with people, is it worth your time to train them, to take the time to train them? If it is, why do you make that effort?
When you say train them in what capacity? Any capacity?
Yeah, to be better human beings as men, to treat women with more respect, because it seems to me as a delay. You're not productive if you step into that space and try to change their mindset, move their, I would be tired. I'm tired just thinking about it.
Well, I don't know how much you can change people, but what I always say is, I don't know what I don't know, and I love to give everyone that benefit of the doubt. And some people might not realize what they're doing or how something is coming across, and shame on me for not even telling you if this is making me feel a certain way or how this is coming across, because I can't expect you to change it if you're not aware of it or not aware of how it's affecting me. So I always try to make a point of, hey, can we talk about that a little bit? And I just want to understand where you're coming from, because this is how it came across to me, and I want to make sure we're on the same page. So I always try to make the concerted effort just to have the conversation, because people are like, oh my God, I'm so sorry, I had no idea, I wasn't even thinking, And again, it's personal, and how you interpret things, it's subjective, right? And some things may come across one way to some person. So I just always try to have the conversation, just so we're all, how are we feeling? How did you feel about that? Or what was your intention? This is how it came across to me. Because can't fix it if we don't know about it or change it, or at least be aware of it.
Pam, I know that you, in the organizations you've worked for and with, you because of your role, touch a lot of different departments, a lot of slices, because of the job descriptions you've had. So when you have those moments when you're trying to make a man aware of their behavior, the words they say, and perhaps the incongruent nature of what they say doesn't fit, do you ever use that, hey, there are other departments that could benefit from your understanding, your better understanding of this, and that, are you now aware of what I'm talking about here? Yes, I am. Okay, fine. Well, go to your department or talk to these other people, because that can help them improve their performance. Is that ever helpful to let them know that it's not necessarily you personally telling them, but it's about a company cultural benefit that they could help support in their behavior or lack thereof?
Well, that's Shelley.
What I would say is, having been at sort of a very high EVP level, I had more latitude. And what I mean by that is that what you're asking is much easier to dispense and do to those who report up and to you, right? Up and to you at all levels. It's much easier to have that conversation and that sort of coaching. You can also do it with peers, depending on the relationship. You can do it with peers for sure. You can pull them aside and go, what was that? I thought you had my back. What are you doing? And that's possible, but it's very difficult to do it above. It's a very difficult thing to do it above. I had, I just want to tell you just very briefly, I had a conversation with a CEO, public company, and there was a woman on the board. There was only one woman on the board at the time, and she was new. For years, it had just been all men. And Pam and I worked at the same company at the same time. And we both entered in a very male-dominated environment. It changed over 10 years, but in the beginning it was all male. And there was one board member did not like me at all. I was told this by multiple people. I'd never spent 1 minute alone with her, never had a one-on-one conversation. She knew nothing about me. I was at a rare one-on-one lunch with the CEO, and I said, what is it? I don't understand. She doesn't even know me. And he said, Shelley, it's a woman thing. And I said, excuse me? He said, it's a woman thing. And I said, what does that mean? He said, you don't know what I mean by a woman thing? And I said, no, I really don't know what you mean. And he said, let me put it this way. You're tall, you're attractive, and you're smart. She's just smart. That was his answer to me. I mean, I was absolutely floored that this conversation was even happening. But the reality of it is these gendered biases and the way we respond and react to one another is not always just from the men treating us the way they treat us as women, but women. That's another thing where boys are taught to hang out together and they have team sports and they watch each other's backs and they have all those phrases about boys before, phrases I won't say. They have all that, right? They're just great women. We have sports and we do that, but it's somehow there's something culturally that's happening there that makes it different and that's brought into the workplace. And women, historically, Pam is an exception. I will tell you, I would say this if she wasn't on the call. Pam is an exception. Women aren't always great about supporting women. And so I think that we have to look at both genders and each other and human beings as a whole. We have to get back to the place where we just level set to decency and kindness to one another and respect to one another regardless. So that's a very challenging thing.
Let me take you back to that scenario then, Shelley, where the gentleman shared this with you about it's a woman thing, and he explained it to you. What would be his role in acknowledging and respecting the power of the other woman who didn't have the full list of compliments that you do, but had some of them? What could he have done differently as a man to respect her position and maybe even in support of joining the two of you together culturally?
That's exactly what he should have done. And he wasn't that kind of leader. He really should have recognized the compliments. She was highly educated and very smart. I mean, just off the charts. I was of no threat to her in terms of a career. And if he would have just approached her in a different way, counseled me, I reported to him, joined us together maybe in a lunch as sort of a get to know, and primed it by telling her the good things about what he saw in me as a leader, reporting to him, would have made all the difference in the world. But he was in a position where he was, I don't say afraid of her, but she held a lot of keys to things for him that her one vote mattered the most. So he didn't choose to go down that road.
So Pam, with that scenario in place, I'm going to not totally shift gears, but I'm going to ask about the rewards for the talented folks you have, both men and women, and ask you to share with me your experiences with pay equity. We all know it's not in the place it should be. There are some industries that are making an effort to try to do better at it, but I know in the world I work in, the sports entertainment world, with executives behind the camera, in front of the camera even still today, and then the corporate experience is primarily in high-end services, law, accounting, medical. It's just not there, and there needs to be some effort made in that. So Pam, in your experiences, what have been the things that need to be done to change the paradigm of women to ask for it, ask for more money? And is that even possible? And if it is possible, who do they talk to? Where in the organizational structure do they go?
It's a great question, and that's something I think we've all struggled with. And it's really just in multiple capacities. One, from an actor perspective, being an actress, I'm part of SAG-AFTRA. I'm a union, so it's very fair and equitable, and there's numbers and it's set up, and I feel very comfortable on the acting side of things. As far as in the business world, there was definitely inconsistencies, and it was brought to light. And I know that companies that I've been part of definitely made a concerted effort to start looking at that and looking at, let alone gender, whatever, but where in the country are you located? Because maybe that was part of it, and it wasn't just because it was male or female, but somebody was in New York versus Kansas, like that. So I know there's definitely concerted efforts being made, and I would say that now, it's hard to have that conversation like, hey, I feel like I deserve a raise, and we've all had that, and you've got to put together, and that's what reviews are for, and rewards and bonuses and quarterly and annual assessments. But I think that comes from the top of a company, and some of the companies I'm working for now, which they've been wonderful with really looking at what that looks like, regardless of who you are, what your gender, race, color, age, whatever that is, because I think ageism is also a thing, which is not today's topic, but we can talk about that at a later time.
Please invite us back for that one, please. Okay, go ahead.
Like, but being as a woman over 50, sometimes, I do feel I have a lot of value. I think companies are really focusing on the qualitative analytics and quantitative, right? So they can really just base it on metrics, and when it's metric based, I think that is when you can start to really align those and ensure that everything is consistent, because otherwise and it also is interesting because sometimes maybe somebody's grandfathered in or brought in at a higher salary, and you've got to try to make those balances, and I think companies that I've been involved with are definitely aware and trying to, reconcile that.
You bring up some interesting points, and I want to throw this question out to both of you based on what you just said. I have been recommending as much time without seeing the face of the candidate, without knowing gender, to the point you made about the statistics, the measurement devices, the successes they've had. And I've had HR staff take names off of resumes and any gender-related language and pronouns within the resumes, so that the male egos that still haven't altered their behavior can't use that as an excuse, both consciously and subconsciously. What do you think?
That's a great idea.
Okay, that's good. Go ahead.
So remember, Shelley, when we were looking, we both, left and we were trying different careers and things, and I was being told a lot that I was overqualified, and so I told Shelley I was going to change my name to Paul. Instead of Pam, I was going to be Paul Renault, and see if it made a difference.
It's got a good ring to it.
It does kind of.
Yeah,
I
like it too, Paul Renault.
Right.
Love it.
And then I was going to change, and then I started taking off my graduation date because people were saying I was overqualified. I'm like, what do you mean overqualified? Like, I've got all this experience, it doesn't make sense to me. And then I told Shelley, remember I said we should do a test and take my name off?
Yes.
To see if it made a difference, because I've got all this experience. And I had a former employee of mine, we both applied to a similar, actually the same role at another company. He got an interview and I didn't, and I had more experience. And
I'll tell you what Pam did do, Pam, if you don't mind my sharing, and I wasn't so sure I was for it. And when she was, we were talking about it, and she actually changed her title, dumbed it down, took out some of her qualifications and experience, and got a job.
We did.
Now, it may have been strategically successful, but why do we have to do that? It's just like crazy that, we have to, it's sort of like the same thing Pam said earlier. We have to kind of change our appearance and wear something up to our necks and pull our hair back and be real serious and God forbid don't laugh too much and, don't smile too much. And there's so many little things that we sometimes have to alter out who we are as a person in order to be deemed acceptable, promotable, and supportable in a corporate environment.
So I've had some pretty successful tests with it, and I've warned people that I've asked to try it. Let's not do anything too far that alters one's impression of ourselves. Like what you mentioned, Shelley, about altering the way we look and being more masculine in the look so that we get consideration for who we are. And I said, one of the ways the reason we're doing this is because we need to change the process. The process cannot support an overly masculine frame of mind. It needs to be neutral. It needs to be in a position where the quality of the individual is considered on its merits. And then we can bring in, when we get down to the bottom, the top 3 or the top 5, whatever it is, then we can bring in the more social and cosmetic components of what defines a person. Because they may have a female boss, or they may have a male boss who's a little less masculine than others. And then you can bring those things in. But we haven't yet changed the cultural dynamics based on age differences. Like, for example, when there's executives in their 50s and 60s, they're evaluating candidates in a different frame of mind than the ones that are setting up the interviews who are in their 20s and 30s. Because I've had that.
How's your experiment going?
Well, right now I've got policy changes in companies now because of it. So the data is showing that they're getting higher productive people that bring more the intangibles that I talk about in athletics. How do you create a creative wide receiver? Well, it's easier to do a creative executive than it is a creative wide receiver. But in both cases, what do they look like? How do I get there? And so with the executive side of things in business, we get a cleaner process that supports the thinking and the ideologies of where the company wants to go. And typically when we remove in the early stages the gender references that are ingrained in someone's head, they can't go there to clarify a choice. They have to stay in the numbers that are the basis for where we want to go as a company. And then the really exciting part is when they actually see the people, then finally they go, whoa. I've actually had executives in an interview, a panel interview, say, I didn't know you were a woman. That just blows me away. Well, that sets a whole dialogue up.
Yeah, it sure does.
but the genuine remark validates the experiment.
Well, I am curious, if you don't mind my asking, how does this work with today's corporate awareness? And in most cases, part of their strategy is to make sure they have a very diverse workforce. How does it work for, because it seems like those two might work against each other in some ways. How does that work? Yeah,
the DEI component comes in at the final, the candidates that are in the final throws. So if
all three top candidates walk in and they're white males, or they're, then what do we do? And so I'm just curious, another conversation for another day.
Yeah, but it has merits on the gender side of things, because if it's all men, we've got the flip side, the counterintuitive flip side here, with a women-run company, and then all of a sudden they're surprised that all the candidates are men. And they have a mindset, culturally, to be diverse. Well, but the best candidates are men, and we put it. Same thing is true with gender, or with ethnicity and cultural differences. All the candidates were of brown or black nature in a predominantly Caucasian-based company, both in ideology and product.
Right.
And they go, oh, damn, we didn't even think a black person could think that way. Well, guess, yeah, oh yeah. And yet, that's the reality. Look, in today's news, Clarence Thomas. I mean, come on.
I know.
Who would think that he would have that mindset as a man of color? We overgeneralize and oversimplify the influence of gender and ethnicity in the ability to just deliver results.
Agreed.
If you want productivity, it's not fully immersed in gender and ethnicity. It's immersed.
And I would dare say, to your point, then, we don't, as executives of companies, or as companies, have to say, I'd like us to be in a place where we didn't have to say, we have to have a quota, we have to have so many of X, Y, and Z. When if we went with your method, what you're saying, we could get to that place just naturally. We just get there.
And
I love it.
And to what we're just talking about, here's a question for bring Pam back into this. Pam, you've been as an actress and as a senior executive in a company and working with all levels of companies. There are moments that the culture knows, if they're really looking at their culture, they know there are environments within their culture that open the door for abuses. What are some things, Pam, that you've noticed that cultures need to do in their environments to make sure abuses don't happen? And I'm talking about economic abuses, physical abuses, gender abuse. I mean, you name it. We know there are things that can be done in the culture to diminish or remove those possibilities. What are some examples you've experienced?
Well, there's multiple things, but I've had some of that come from like just people who aren't in the same state, right? And so maybe somebody you report to and somebody else is in California or whatever. But I think that education, having programs, explaining like this is not okay. If this does occur, outlets where you can feel comfortable giving that information without any retaliation, because it's a fear, and you can be retaliated against for speaking up or having an opinion or flagging something that maybe other people have also flagged, and I mean it's a problem. I think having those, companies had been doing those classes where you could either say things like, I have a flag, or this is happening, and HR will come and say, if anyone is experiencing this, please let me know. But again, sometimes it doesn't feel safe because that person is usually, the person that people are complaining about is usually brought in and it's addressed, and then they can't help but feeling, attacked and on the defense, and there is maybe just and then that retaliation. I think it's just as much education and transparency as possible.
So Pam, what would you do, and this may be hypothetical, you may not have experience with this, but what would you do with someone, I'm not going to say what gender, someone who is socially muted? That's just part of who they are. And I deal with all kinds of experiences with every kind of modality of educational capability, from just off the charts genius smart to the ADHDs and everything in between on the spectrum. And many times that creates social muted conditions. They just don't get it. And you could insult them all day long and they would not know that they were insulted. What do you do about that in the cultures? Are we doing anything about that kind of misunderstanding? Or are we just taking what they do as reality and persecuting them for it without consideration for how they might not even be aware and socially adept?
It's a great question. It's a bit of what I was touching on earlier, where it's just having that conversation. And it is hard to have that conversation and say, hey, I just want to bring this up. And to Shelley's point, it might be somebody that you're reporting to that's above your head, and you might not feel comfortable having that. Obviously, that conversation is tough, but that's what you're, if you don't feel comfortable talking to your manager, we always say, we'll talk to someone in human resources. But again, it goes back to that comfort level of feeling like, am I going to be retaliated against? Am I like a whistleblower? What am I viewed upon? And it does happen, and it's unfortunate. I just think for those people that aren't aware of it, it's just that is part of the company's and management's responsibility to, do assessments and feedback and be addressed at a different level, not from an employee having to say that. That is a company's responsibility to be looking at, at their team and feeling confident that people are addressed and handling things and in accordance to how they should be.
Yeah, and many times, Pam, we as a society globally use different vehicles to send the messages to people that have a difficult time understanding, because they're just kind of like, they just deer in headlights sometimes with certain social behaviors. They don't get it. We use theater. We use movies. We use wonderful comedic movies. You see where I'm going with this, Pam? We have wonderful theatrical scenes like in Invisible, a film that is soon to be produced. I'm so crossing my fingers. But Pam, I want you to help me with this infomercial and explain to everybody how wonderful Invisible is and the awards it's recently won at the film festivals.
So I am a co-founder and owner of a company called Firefly Rev Studios with these two amazing women, Krista Gaynor and Laura Carson. They're brilliant. And it's interesting because talk about diversity, we all have different backgrounds, right, and what we come from. And we seek to embrace that about each other because we know we all have different perspectives on things. So we purposely ask, hey, what do you think about that? Because we all have different backgrounds and perspective, and we embrace that about each other, and being an all-female-owned company, owned and operated. Krista and Laura wrote this fantastic full-feature comedy, Invisible. Oh, see, Ella, my dog, loves it as well.
Yeah, there you go. Ella wants to participate. Love her.
The whole neighborhood of dogs are getting very excited.
Yep.
They're now in the finalists for the Atlanta Film Festival for this hilarious comedy. It's beautiful. It's full feature comedy. It's so funny. We did a table read. It was about a year and a half ago, I think. And Will Forte was in it, Tony Cavallero, Edie Patterson. We had, it was just like an amazing, oh my God, it was amazing. And it's so funny. And I'm really excited to see what's coming next. We're speaking with some potential distributors, and we really want to get this made, and we're excited. And it's fun being, female-owned company. We're embracing and empowering what we can control, right? And during a pandemic and moving forward, and we're excited. We have this great roster of projects, and we're excited to bring these, and we're looking at NFTs and VR, and it's so exciting to be on the forefront of all of this fantastic technology. And yes, we're girls, and we embrace it, and we love it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And it's funny because being invisible, hence the name, if somebody turns 40, a woman, and feeling, invisible and literally it turns invisible. So it's really, it speaks to kind of a lot of things that we experience.
Well, as you know, and trying to be as humble as possible in my comments, the writing, the setup of the storyline is so socially relevant and so tongue-in-cheek, and I'm grateful to be able to have the opportunity to participate with Krista and Laura and Pam in that venture. And I'll say it, if nobody else does, you were the first to put on a virtual table read, as though it was a feature film. But it was a virtual table read, and it was so wonderful with Will Forte and the crew that participated in that, and you as well. You had your moments on screen in the virtual sense, exactly. Now, as I say that, I want to shift to Shelley and make sure that Shelley gets your moment here about what are you doing right now? What's exciting about what's in the world of Shelley?
Well, funny you should ask. You know, when the last place I worked, and Pam and I worked together in very different departments. She worked sort of on the digital distribution of advertising side, and I worked in what turned out to be one department after another. I sort of pulled it together and created a business within a business called Fathom Entertainment, Fathom Events, and it was eventually sold to AMC Regal and Cinemark, and they took it private. I had an opportunity to stay or go. My kids were then 7, and I didn't even know them. I mean, I was just always working and on a plane somewhere. So I decided I would step back, do a little consulting, so I'm at least staying in the game, but really focus on my kids. And I thought when I got into junior high, I would maybe start to poke around and maybe get back in if the market would have me. And then COVID hit. So I've been consulting through this period of time. And it's just now that I do get calls from time to time. Pam, for one of the companies that she was working with, set me up for a position, and you'll be interested to know that they didn't ever see me on camera or anything. It was all on the phone, and they kept moving me right along based on my skill set, which I really appreciate about this company. It didn't work out because of reorg, but the point is that was a really good experience. But I'm really excited about my next chapter. I've just gotten a call from a company that is working with me, looking for a potential opportunity that meets what I'm looking for, which is sort of a startup kind of place. Is really what I love. I love startups. I've done them my whole life. And that's what I'm looking for. And so to be continued. I don't know what's coming, but something's coming very soon.
Well, it's always, as I say to anybody I deal with, it's great to have choices. And especially if the choices are self-created and imagined through your visioning processes to bring them to fruition, because it guarantees almost that you own it. You know, if it's your vision and you move it forward, you own it. Too often people are given things that they aren't fully invested in.
Well, part of that is being in a position to be able to choose, to be able to strategize and move forward. I mean, not everybody has that advantage. Working paycheck to paycheck, but I would say to those folks that it feels like you don't, but you do. So there's always, outside of whatever you have to do, there's always time to find out and figure out what you want to do and create it for yourself. There just is, and Pam has done that in her life. So
with these experiences recently, as well as the conversation we've had about the interviewing process, when it's a project, you've got a plan, you've got this business idea, reflecting back on the chapters of your lives when you did that. When you know that the audience you're going to be delivering to are men, and men exclusively, what do you do differently in your approach to the presentation?
I personally focus on data, numbers, because I know people receive information differently. And just from my experience, and people that I've worked with too, to kind of learn how each other receives information, and I focus more on data and numbers and the facts, and sometimes for women it's more on the creative side. It just depends on the audience and the type of people, but I usually focus on data and statistics and back to facts. It's just what I've done that seems to work and get through.
Shelley, how about you? Do you add anything to that, or just stay with what Pam says?
To be honest, I think it's different depending on what the project is and who it is really that I'm trying to influence. I mean, so it's different every time. I mean, there have been, I will admit, situations where I've sent in one of my male SVPs instead of me going to pitch it because I thought it would be received better. You know, for me, I always focus on what's the end goal. It's not about fixing gender and culture wars at work. It's how do I get to where I need this division to be, and this project needs to be moved forward. So sometimes I've done that, and I don't like that I have to do that, but I've done it, and I would do it again if I needed to. But there are other times where you don't wait until the meeting, right? You start influencing the influencers of the individual you're trying to sway. So you start working in advance of that meeting, trying to get other soldiers on your side so that when you do come into that meeting, you're not alone. And that's a strategy that usually works as well. So, and then I'd like, facts, figures, bottom line. And how do I make sure that the individual in that room that I need to influence the most benefits from what I'm saying?
Or buy-in.
The buy-in. I'm glad you said buy-in, because I'm going to ask you guys both about how do you avoid slipping into that ends justify the means trench, and so you stay true to the purposeful intent. Like, for example, with me, and I'm a unique situation. I've fired more clients than I've kept because they didn't align. And not everybody can say that. I mean, I'm kind of spoiled because of what I've accomplished and what I've kind of trenched for myself in this world, but not everybody can do that. Where do you guys sit on that? Ends justifying the mean kind of slippery slope.
Pam?
Gotcha.
I guess it's my dog. Every time we have she's like, I'm leaving. She just left. It's a good question. I think, to Shelley's point too, like, I focus on the goal and what we need to do to get there. And if you're planning it out and you're looking at, there's so many things that go into that, right? Yep. Budget, timing, what's the goal, what's the end result, what are we all working towards, and taking any potential like egos, information, who does it benefit out? I guess just focusing on just having a project management background, and my brain just thinks that way. I just look at what's the goal, when do we want it, how are you defining success? To me, that is a great question to ask. How do we define success? Because that looks different to different people. And I want to make sure everyone is on the same page with what that looks like. And then how do we get there? Because people may have, again, it goes back to, I always like to make sure we're on the same page with what we're expecting and clarifying expectations, because that's huge. And if you have that at the beginning, then together you can create what you need to create with all feeling validated and confident in success of the outcome.
Clarifying expectations is a constant statement for me, especially in the first meetings I have with people. So many people, however, and they get in trouble, they don't ask early enough about what are the expectations, so that when you dial it down to present the project, it's clear, it's on point. So have you ever had reluctance from anybody giving you that information so that you can set expectations? In advance to your presentations?
No, I haven't actually, because you keep asking until you get the question, until you get the answer, because together, like, we're going to define this, and like, what does this look like? What does this look like to you? Not like a closed question of like, hey, does this sound good? Yes, no. What does that mean to you? When you say success, what does that mean? And what numbers? And what time frame? Getting very specific so we're on the same page, because I might say, oh, this is what this lounge chair looks like. And in my mind, it's this fabulous lounge chair. And Shelley might say, no, I need a lounge chair that does a pedicure also, right? So we both have like different versions.
That sounds fabulous, by the way.
I think we may have different versions of what that lounge chair looks like. So I think you need to clarify and ask those questions until you are very clear on what that looks like and how you define. When you say success, what does that mean? Because I might say, hey, I finished it on time, and they might say, well, no, I needed it to do this, that, and the other, and we didn't discuss that. So you have to have it very clear. And I also think it's smart to have this all documented, so when it does come back, you can always take out personal conversations and refer back to the agreed upon document and what that success looked like, how it looked, and how it was defined.
You bring up a point I just want to share with you.
There are times, I'm so sorry, there are times when, I've had a boss say, you tell me, Shelley, and you tell me, you're the one who's in charge here. I have had that, so that's exactly what I do.
You both are touching on a point I want to emphasize to you, especially for younger people. Self-efficacy is one of the top characteristics that are difficult for young people in particular to practice. And we don't train them well enough at younger ages on how to ask good questions, how to be inquisitive. Even though they may be curious kids privately with their friends, when it comes to the more consequential outcomes, business transactions, looking for a job, they don't have a good sense of feeling about self-efficacy. And that means I know myself well enough, I will ask the question about what is success? What do you expect of me? And nowadays with technology, we don't have to wait. We can go really, really fast. Back in my day, we had time to think about it, and we had the casual nature of being able to kind of wait. Well, no, not the case anymore. So we need to match our training to those abilities in both technology and human capabilities to move this forward.
And communication is a key piece of that, right?
Huge.
And that's critical. I mean, technology is going to evolve, and we can all adapt and learn, but it's that communications piece. It's confidence. You got to help people. Like my kids, I try to help build their confidence in communicating, and feeling validated that their question is as good as anyone else's answer might be, and then to really understand what critical thinking really is, right? That's really what you're talking about. Who, what, when, where, why, how on every situation. They're not necessarily swayed by an opinion that is surface level, but what does that really mean? And to understand that going through that process of who, what, when, where, why, how, and getting the answer for themselves is so important in almost everything they do in life.
Stick with me, Shelley, and give me your last comment about what the takeaway is you want from our audience, and then we're going to go right to Pam with her takeaway that she wants to have people.
Takeaway from
our discussion today, what's one single takeaway you want them to really resonate with?
I suppose I'd go back to what my parents told me. My parents, from a very early age, and they had their own business, and we dealt with the public. So we saw every stripe that you can imagine that just lives in our country. And the most important thing I learned was one word, which was respect. Respect. Respect every human being, large and small, black and white, male and female, 6-year-old to 106-year-old. Respect is the most important thing. I think that's where we start. That's where we start as human beings in our personal lives, and it's where we should start in our relationships at work. Just extend, receive, and be grateful for respectful environments and try to create them.
Pam, last word, build on that for me. What is your takeaway you want the audience to have from today?
Ask, include, be kind,
So good.
include, and feel good to ask that. We all don't know everything, and it's okay not to. So ask and include and learn.
Guys, thank you so much. Stick with me after we close off the camera, but let me say goodbye and good luck for the weekend. It's going to be a beautiful weekend in Colorado. Go check out the NCAA. Your bracket's busted. Mine is. I know that for a fact because nobody's as predictive as what has happened this weekend and this last week. Have fun with whatever you do. Be safe. And as my guests have said, be inclusive and respect those you include. Have a great day today, everybody. Take care.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Bye, guys.
Excellent. Potted up the music. It's all good. Stop the video.
Recording stopped.
I can't tell you guys how much I appreciate this. You were so wonderful. You played off each other well. You're good listeners because of that. Thank you so much. And especially Pam, to you for helping me remember that Shelley is out there and I should reach out to her. So it was a great duo, the two of you.
Good, thank you. Pam, thank you for inviting me. You too, Walt. It was very kind of you to include me.
Awesome stuff. Now, remember, this is going to get edited over the weekend. I'll put some cleaning touches to it. Not much has to be done other than pre and post. And then it's going to get posted to my podcast network with Spotify, Google, iTunes, et al. And I'm not very good at promoting myself, as Pam knows, but I sent a text to Pam that I felt really guilty about after I sent it. I'm in 8 countries, Pam. Can you believe that? I can't believe that shit. This white guy.
What? This is awesome.
Yeah.
That's fantastic.
Well,
Yes.
I started doing the platform push from the live show about a year ago, and it just has been really wonderful. Anchor FM is the platform distributor for me, and it's been just wonderful to have that happen. So.
Well, I have to say I've been remiss in not following up to watch you. I'm going to watch you. That's fantastic.
Yeah,
Good for you.
If you just go to Spotify and type in 360 Performance on their podcast page, it'll pop right up. I've got topics from racism in the locker room to to shows like this. It's all about performance. It's all about pushing the envelope.
And how often are the shows?
Every week. Every show repeats, so every show's evergreen. So I'll post this show on Monday afternoon, and it'll be out there every week, available to whoever wants to listen to it.
That's very cool. Congratulations on your success.
Well, my ultimate success is to go national. I want to get a syndicated podcast. And share with more kids, more adults as well about performance. I developed a survey process years ago with a colleague that measures internal desires, intrinsic motivational desires. And I've got an 80% predictive power in the survey for human behaviors.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's.
Is that true? Could you do that for a 14-year-old? Could you take that survey, or is he just too developed?
No, we have normalized it down to 9 years old. So
Really?
So 14-year-olds are right in that wonderful place to get them data. We get good data on them. Now understand that this is not an annualized thing. You redo this data when there's life-changing events. For example, for me, when I became a grandfather. My kids are old enough to have their own kids. That was a life-changing event. So I had done my profile in our research days when I was really actively raising kids and sending them to college and all that kind of stuff. It's a whole different scenario. My life attitude and opinions change about family.
Sure.
I don't want to have kids. I want to give them back.
Yeah. Yes.
Here, take them. And so your son, for example, 14 going into college would be the next time to reassess a 14-year-old, because who they are now will drive their decision-making and behavioral processes throughout high school and into college.
And can a parent learn from that?
Oh my gosh.
Say he does a survey, and can I help guide him then, and maybe change some of the negative outcomes and potential negative outcomes?
Here's the magic, Shelley. You get your profile done at an adult level, then I have comparative analyses to share. Like, for example, with coaches, I can tell coaches, you cannot yell at this kid. If you yell at this kid and you have a predisposition for being very vocal, you will put this kid into a funk, and you will not get out of him what the scholarship value is.
Well, that's really good.
So for parents, it's about, okay, what are your thoughts about other kids? How active should I expect you to be? Kind of a nut job, and how do I manage that? Where are you at on the spectrum? What are your feelings about violence? What are your feelings about intimacy? At a 14-year-old's perspective.
That's very cool. That's super cool.
Yeah.
It's on my website. It's called an RMP.
I'm going to check that out, and his twin sister as well.
And just
I need to do it.
And ask.
And my husband. I mean, I think that how he comes at things and how I come at things, very different.
And what this
every set of parents, we feel like we're just screwing up our kids.
What this does for me is I can analyze people quickly and not have to waste 2 years trying to figure out ways to discover who they are.
That's amazing. That's amazing.
We're investigating whether or not we're going to get into the more social, find a mate, dating kind of stuff. Because everything else that's out there is just social bullshit.
I think you would explode with that. I'm telling you.
I don't have.
Look at the dating site.
Yeah, I don't have the bandwidth right now, and that's why I'm holding back. I don't have the bandwidth, and I've got other things I want to do than build an organization around dating.
Yeah, but it'd make a lot of money.
Well, yeah.
I know. That's the thing, is how do you break through, though? You want to break through on the national level. I'm just saying.
Yeah, and
sometimes things like that.
Here's how I'm going to do it. It's going to be done by experiences like you guys will have, like my athletes are having. I've managed so many couples, career versus spouse interactions. You know, the wife with the pro football player. And she's wondering, why in the hell are you sleeping?
Right.
She doesn't get it. His body is probably inflamed to,
Right.
and she doesn't get it. And he doesn't know how to communicate that to her. So when I come in, I say, look, you're not a verbal person, and she's somebody who lights up when you talk to her.
Yeah.
You got to get it. You got to get it.
Yes.
And so I've been really blessed with being able to help young people survive.
Can I ask you, why don't men listen?
We've been
Every woman has this complaint.
We've been socially conditioned to not be empathetic. It's a power privilege play. We socialize our young men. It's getting better at younger ages. Like you're
That's
taking
why there are
interest.
so many in the GOP, but that's another story.
Well, yeah, and why
But
people
that's-
believe.
No empathy.
Yeah, it's one of my mentors is Stephen Covey, and Stephen said, seek first to understand before you ask to be understood, and that's the quickest definition of empathy, empathic listening. And he also said, begin with the end in mind when it comes to time management. So when you combine the lack of wanting to look at anybody else's agenda and prioritizing yourself first, and add to that no desire to want to listen to no other voice than your own, you're always right. It's my company.
Right. It's that fundamental thing from my parents in a much more rudimentary way, which is put yourself in someone else's shoes.
Right.
Put yourself in someone else's shoes. Before you make a judgment, a decision, or lash out, put yourself in their shoes. And that's, I haven't always been mindful of it in the moment, but it is part of who I am, part of my DNA. And I just think parents can teach it, or can you teach it? Our baby's already hardwired. I don't know.
Yeah, and I do a big thing with awareness. One of my retired athletes, he's renewing his agreement with me, and we're going to a whole nother level because now he's talking about company expansion, and one of the things that he's wrestling with is being more present and aware. Now he has the time to be present, but there's so much about him that distracts him from being aware. So in our first visit, I gave him an exercise. I said, take a walk by yourself, and when you're walking, I want you to be aware of your surroundings. And I said, here's what I mean by that. When you see a tree, see the texture of the bark. Count the number of needles on the pine tree. Don't just see the color and the shape. Mm-hmm. And then when you get familiar with that, see if you can feel the sound of the wind. And I said, when you then finish that walk, go back and recognize more about your wife than you've ever seen before.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And he came back the next visit. He says, I've gained more knowledge in 2 visits with you than I've ever gotten from any coach I've ever been with. I'm having tingles just thinking about it again.
That's awesome.
So he's
the first thing I think of is, I hope I have on my makeup and have my hair just right. So my mom look at me like pine needles.
Well, and it's a self-awareness piece that allows you to take the phrase I give them as a morning mantra about it's all about me in a self-aware way. It's not a selfish remark and mantra. It's you can't help anybody else until you've taken care of you. And that's based on addictive theory behavior. Addicts don't fix their addiction until they realize they have a problem. And that awareness doesn't happen unless they fight through the pain and anguish of the disease. So if we take ourselves back away from that and use it in the sublime everyday activities we have, can you imagine how much better we're going to be?
So much.
It's like being on a plane, right? They teach you in an emergency, you put your own on first so you can help somebody else.
Exactly. Yeah. No, and there are countless examples like that, Pam, about what I just said. But we don't train that modality as the first awareness piece. Take care of you, because you can't take care of anybody else until you do. So they teach that in the school for the blind with people that support blind people on how to. My first experience with this on a negative side was I had a photographer who was a paraplegic, and he had white hair down his back. He was a rocker, and if he could have rode a motorcycle, he would have been a motorcycle rider. But he's in a wheelchair. So we're going across the street, and without even asking him, I grab the handles of his wheelchair and try to help him down the curb. He grabs the wheels and stops. I literally fall over the top of him because of how fast he stopped me. He says, nobody can hear this. He said, "You motherfucker, don't ever do that to me again." I'm going, what the hell? What did I do? He said, "You assumed I needed your help. You were not aware of who I am." And that just emblazoned
He was
me.
offended.
Oh my
He was
God.
offended.
Oh, he was pissed. He was pissed. But I was so much more aware as a human being now of.
That's, oh God, what a lesson he taught you.
Oh, yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Oh, it's and that was.
But, you know, the thing is that teaching is so we can get things intellectually, but changing our behavior, that's the really hard part.
It's got to be
Right?
action
And
oriented. Yep.
Walk the talk, right? We can teach it to you, but what, are you gonna walk the talk? You can say you're doing it, but are you?
So this comes back to the numbers on the data set, guys. When you have those numbers, I have the pockets of where we need to focus our attention.
That's awesome.
I know how aware you are to being aware. I know how aware you are to power, to control, because those are all measured.
That's awesome.
And I can focus you in on those in our training, not have to guess, not have to
Do
do
you
kind of.
always have guests on your show?
No, not always.
Because it seems to me you might do well with a co-host. Because in a topic and bringing it up and having somebody, even a layperson, like someone like Pam or me, asking you these things, we're getting into the conversation because you have such great insight and information that I think on your own it may sound like a lecture, but in a pair you would just be encouraged to give your opinion and insight and clinical opinion and insight in a way that wouldn't come off like you're an hour on the radio by yourself just spousing up what you think without anyone curious enough to be kind of pushing you to get those answers.
Yeah, and I'm at a point now. It's interesting you bring it up now because I've been thinking through what's the next phase and maturation of my show.
Well, and think about some of the most successful talk shows have been pairs, really.
Shelley,
Especially on the radio.
Shelley's good at asking those questions and sparking that, getting all the information out. Like, that would be interesting.
I'm a very curious person, but
That's really good questions.
Oh, thank you, but no, I do. I'm curious. I'm a curious person. But anyway, you should really consider that.
Well, there's a company in town that services on-air celebrities, and they create podcasts and interview settings for them, that kind of stuff. It's called Engage.
Yeah.
And it's
Engage Media?
Yeah, and the kid that runs it is Daniel Hennis. Hennis? Yeah. And I came in touch with him because of one of my athletes is using them for creating his reels, and
I've heard of Engage Media. They do good work.
and marketing him. So
Yeah.
I've got a meeting with him next week to talk about. I've got strategies that help you build out your talent, but I'd also like you to look at me as talent.
Right. Right.
And co-host me, because I could do a sports co-host show with my client and help him, but he could be my second, to poke the question.
And then it benefits him, or benefits you, which benefits him, or benefits him, which benefits you, to promote, because that's what he does. So that's good. That's smart. That's very smart.
So I'm looking at it.
Well, if you ever get to a place where you want to do a non-sports related thing, where you're talking about the kinds of things we talked about today, cultural, social, humankind, I'm going to pitch myself. I'd be a great co-host.
Yeah,
I
I think we need to finding the platform to release it is what I want to do. I want to get a good studio, because if I do it by myself with you, then I'm going to get into the engineering hat, and I don't want to do that because it'll distract the shit out of me.
Yeah.
You used to have one, Shelley. Shelley used to have a studio doing this, remember?
I did, but you know who really put all the engineering stuff together is Dan, and I can't get him to return a phone call these days.
Yeah.
His son could do it. And they know how to do it on the cheap.
Well, and I have my own studio at home. I mean, I've got the deck and
Where do you live?
Westminster,
In Westminster. Okay.
and it's portable. I can pack that thing up and bring it anywhere.
I should think about that.
I'm building out my basement. Maybe I'll put in a little podcast studio.
Well, gosh, Kelly, these days, or Shelley, these days it's so small. It's just like
It is. It's a closet. It could be a closet.
yeah,
It doesn't
it's
matter.
just so cool.
And if you create a virtual background, just have a green screen, you can do it anywhere.
Yeah, and that's
Like you said.
that's what I do at the office. I have a green screen in my office because I do training videos for my website. So I talk about the mental side of how to connect to the physical. So I'll demonstrate to a receiver, for example, how to get their mind in place and exercises they could go through to do that. So I use
That's really good.
I use
do you have
wireless
any
mics.
baseball players in your?
Yeah,
Wow.
I've got my most famous one is Curtis Granderson.
I don't know it. I don't know, but
Curtis-
I'm willing to tell you that.
Curtis just retired.
Okay.
And then I have a pitcher that's with Aaron, Aaron's last name. Sanchez.
That's
sorry.
a good name.
Aaron Sanchez.
Hard to forget.
Yeah.
Aaron Sanchez.
And he's a pitcher for Washington now. He's with the Nationals now.
I only ask because my son is, he's on a 14-year-old majors traveling team. They're
Which-
very, very good.
which
and,
community?
And that's his desire. What's that?
Which community?
And well, it's with the Slammers, which is a club.
Yeah. Okay, I know the
that
Slam.
all the communities sort of feed into.
Yeah.
And he's just obsessed. And I just am thinking that maybe if I go back, would your videos, any of your athletic videos, be accessible on the website?
I don't until I get an engagement because I'll customize videos. I've got some videos I share with kids, but just go to my website and look at the videos I have there that are more motivational than anything.
Yes.
What is he?
I will.
You said he's a pitcher?
He's a pitcher. He also plays third and is a held outfielder. He's all the above, but he's a really good.
So he's got an arm.
pitcher. Yes, he does. Sure
I,
does. And we only let him play tackle football once. Last year he had been playing flag. I'm just not saying from my mother. His arm is unbelievable and accurate and fabulous, but he doesn't want to be a quarterback. I was like, no, thanks.
left
he
or
doesn't
right
like,
hand?
like the pressure.
left or right
What's
hand?
that?
Left or right hand?
He's right. He's right.
It's okay.
His sister got the left hand.
How many
Sister got the left
how many
hand.
pitches does he have?
What does that mean?
Fastball, curve, slider, knuckle.
Oh yeah. He has a fastball. He has a curve. He has a slider. He has the slow one. Whatever
Change,
that's called.
change up.
Yeah, I think the change up. So I think he only has those 4 primarily.
Well, here's my process. Ask him if he wants a mental conditioning coach. Then he'll ask you,
Okay.
what does that mean, Mom? And the next sentence is, a mental performance coach helps you get your brain right with your body.
Why does he need that?
Well,
Why does he need that?
and at this
Because
age, on the
he-
mound, at a competitive level,
Exactly it. If it's anything, it's his head. Sometimes it's great, and he's gotten so much better in the last year and a half. But always, all the way coming up, it was always.
yeah,
him.
and most of my pro level players are catchers and pitchers. Because the catcher looks at the field, makes a cognitive decision about what we're going to do. The pitcher is the one who gets the signal and decides whether or not he can deliver that pitch.
Yes, the pressure's on them. for sure,
Exactly.
at every pitch.
So I
But, well, I don't want to take up your time. You've been so great. I'm so happy you invited me. I'm so great to reconnect with you. Well, and Pam, I got to call you, and we got to catch up. On
Oh, I
something.
know, we will,
I
okay.
got to tell you what's
All
going
right,
on. I
guys.
want to hear more about your film.
enjoy the rest of the day. If you need me, Shelley, you know where to call me.
I do.
See you, Pammy.
So much, thanks for having us.
Bye, guys.
Bye.
Thank you.